In today's video, we're going to be reacting to a video by Derek of Simnett Nutrition, in which he gives us what he considers to be the top 10 misconceptions that people have about vegans. Let's see if you don't finish the video feeling like I did, as if you're being gaslighted about what constitutes a misconception.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So there's a lot of misconceptions about vegans, and for whatever reason, I've been hearing more and more of them online lately. So in this video, I thought I would go over the top 10 things that people get wrong about vegans. So there's a bunch of them, and I might miss some of them. So if I do, or if you disagree with me on any of them, definitely put it in the comment section down below. So number one, vegans are weak and skinny. So as if everybody has to be focused on gaining muscle or being this, big muscular bodybuilder. And the same could be said for people that are on an omnivorous diet. Like there's definitely people that eat meat that are skinny as well. So there are tons of vegans out there that are strong and muscular, including, I like to think, myself, and of course, a bunch of my friends that are also online personalities as well. And I'm sure a bunch of you that are watching this. And with all that we do to put this message out there, I can't believe that this myth and misconception is still getting thrown around.
A common way that people try to gain muscle is through the use of protein powders. Derek appears to be a bodybuilder, and so it's not surprising that he uses them. Both vegan dieters and omnivorous populations will use them, and it apparently works for both. But if you have an advantage like that, it's kind of difficult for people to compare themselves to you. Also, if you're coming from a base of an omnivorous diet, you have an advantage. The best way for me to rest assured would be if any people like Nimai, Derek, or Brian came from a pure vegan background and were still able to achieve the goals that they have been able to achieve. This type of thing is quite difficult to prove, I understand, but in any case, we can just go based on what we know of their life stories. From what I understand, all of these individuals consumed some animal products in their formative years. And so, it's hard to know what is allowing for what. It's hard to attribute something positive to a vegan diet in terms of how well it allows for a human to achieve their fitness goals untainted.
So maybe people do notice that vegans are skinnier because on average, vegans do have a lower BMI. It's because this diet is just so good for helping with weight management. So there's nothing wrong if you are a skinny vegan or if you don't focus on building muscle or whatever, but there's no reason why if you're on a vegan diet that you can't be strong and muscular.
It's interesting that he says that because having a heavier muscle mass is also something that contributes to a person having a higher BMI. So does it mean that even muscular vegans who may have been counted in the collection of data were still smaller than the muscular omnivores who they were likely compared to? Also, it's very interesting that he mentions that because, of course, on the other hand, perhaps vegans are skinnier than omnivorous populations. I've heard many ideas about why that might be, including healthy user bias. Vegans tend to be more health conscious, and so it would stand to reason that they take into consideration things that can help them maintain a quote-unquote healthy weight.
Number two, vegans think that they are better than everyone. So most vegans just want to do their thing and be left alone for the most part. And they aren't going around like thinking, I'm better than this person or that person. And I think that most vegans understand that before they went vegan, they weren't. They used to eat meat and they would still have considered themselves a good person.
So basically, Derek makes it patently obvious that he really does consider himself a better person for no longer consuming animal products. When you feel morally superior to someone, it's almost impossible for you not to neg them, even when you're making a YouTube video talking about how vegans don't just go around randomly negging meat eaters.
With good morals and all that. I know I did, and at some point along the way, something clicked, whether it was watching a certain documentary or seeing pictures and videos of like slaughterhouse footage. Just something changed in my mind and in many people's minds, and they just decided, I do not want to support this anymore. Lots of vegans are really excited about what they're doing. They're helping the animals, they feel amazing, and they want to share this with others.
These claims are really questionable. Perhaps there are vegans out there who grow their own food without the use of pesticides or without the need for crop protection, but the ones who are getting their food at any average supermarket, for example, are definitely not helping the animals. Also, it isn't as though you can't find videos of people claiming to feel amazing, only to find that it's not long before you eventually find videos of those same people talking about how they blatantly lied, about how they felt absolutely miserable after the honeymoon phase of adopting a vegan diet. We are forever taking people at their word when it comes to diet outcomes, and so if I'm expected to take the positive ones seriously, you best believe I'm also taking the negative ones and the retracted ones seriously.
And a lot of the time when they do, other people feel like they are being put down, and this kind of gets them into some sort of defensive mode, and then they think that this person is putting themselves on a pedestal. And you can kind of compare it to this. It's like when somebody is a drinker and then they meet someone at a party or whatever who doesn't drink, it often kind of puts a mirror onto what they're doing, and then they all of a sudden have to question, their own actions, and yeah, people get defensive. So I guess maybe that's why people get this preconceived notion that vegans think they're better than everyone, but really they don't.
I repeat, in any situation in which a person feels what they do is morally superior to what another person does, as Derek pointed out, in a variety of scenarios, not just in a conversation about diet, it's very difficult to separate that from one's attitude. Obviously, people can and do get triggered when they are judged, so it isn't as though that's not to be expected, but the thing we're talking about is the judgment. If a person goes so far as to bring up things that another person is doing that they think are wrong, especially when they do the opposite, that is them then expressing superiority in a way. That would be the reason why the other person feels judged or belittled, because that person is legitimately placing themselves above the other person. And in some cases, it wouldn't matter if the person who feels belittled actually deserves being judged that way. Evolutionarily speaking, we're supposed to feel something when we are judged because we want to fit in. If we're not a part of the social group, we become ostracized, and that's dangerous for us. So that's why that feeling is there. But sometimes we have to be logical and actually dig deeper to know where to go from the initial shock felt during the incident. I think it's very important for people to learn how to ignore that voice because although it has given us an advantage, it doesn't do much for us in life today when we recognize that we can still have a job and feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, and provide ourselves with shelter regardless. On the other hand, if we would indeed be better off changing our behavior, we can change our behavior for reasons other than the fact that we were judged for them. We have to find the reasons why we should change our behavior and subsequently change them based on reason, not based on emotion.
Number 3, vegans kill more animals than meat eaters do. So I've heard this repeated so much lately, especially in comments online, and I've even seen it in some reels. And I think Ted Nugent recently went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he made this claim saying that
you really want to kill the most things, be a vegan.
So the idea is that one cow can feed a whole bunch of people, whereas the deaths that happen from combine harvesting and the protection of crops kills more animals than, just that one cow dying for a bunch of people to eat. So this comparison might have some truth to it when you consider the very best case scenario of pasture-raised cows, compared to the mice and other small mammals that are killed in harvesting and protecting the monocrop grains that we eat. But we know that is such a tiny percentage of the meat that people are eating. Less than 5% of cows are pasture-raised and finished, and like a fraction of a percentage of chickens. But what most people are eating is factory farmed animals that are fed grain and soy. If we were to use this as the comparison to just humans eating those foods, you would see that this statement is extremely false. It takes up to 10 pounds of animal feed to create 1 pound of edible beef. So how anyone can make this assertion is beyond me.
I'm going to put some establishing points on the screen for your viewing pleasure. You are welcome to pause and read or to keep listening. There is a 10-second gap of silence in which the text is shown starting now. Please be prepared to pause. Derek mentioned that in the best case scenario, with pasture-raised animals, we can significantly decrease the amount of animal harm and animal death required to provide a human with the proper nutrition. We should also keep this in mind. Despite the large number of animals that die in animal agriculture, the total number of living things that die altogether for the provision of crops that we are growing primarily for human consumption is far greater. Even if you wanted to argue that it's a one-to-one, it would mean that they're both even, and that we would still need to try to find the lesser of two evils. At least on the side of animal consumption, people are being provided greater nutrition, and when done properly, there should be a positive impact on the environment. This is in opposition to the growing of crops and the production of supplements, both of which inevitably lead to negative impacts on the environment, with nary a positive to be found anywhere. When I sit down to eat a bowl of ground beef and butter, I understand that animals died for a portion of the food that the cow I'm eating was fed. But those deaths were on account of humans wanting something from those crops. In short, those animals were always going to die for us to have those crops. If I stop eating beef, there is no option for me to just simply get pasture-raised meat in which far fewer animals would have died. I would be forced to consume crops that I would be forced to accept the fact that, for every single ingredient of the dish I'm eating, I have no choice but to be supporting harmful practices that inherently include exorbitant amounts of animal suffering and death. And I wouldn't even be well fed at the end of it, which completely defeats the purpose of eating. This is why it's impossible for me to see it as a one-to-one or to see it as the same at all. Can you start to feel my pain, even just a little, at how these misconceptions are just simply not misconceptioning?
And then think of the fishing industry. I remember reading that up to 40% of fish caught is bycatch. And these are fish that are of the non-targeted species, and they often just get thrown overboard when they are dying, dead, or injured. So this statement is definitely not true.
I agree that there's a lot of bullshit that goes on with farming practices almost no matter where you look, but I'm still reminded of the negative impact of chemical fertilizers and pesticides on the environment, and that includes air and sea.
Number 4, vegans miss meat. So of course, this might be true for when you first go vegan. You know, if you've been eating a certain way for most of your life, things aren't gonna just change overnight. However, once you understand the suffering and, you know, the death and everything that is behind the food that is on your plate or was on your plate, you definitely don't crave this stuff anymore and you do not want to eat it.
This is the kind of thing I think depends on the individual. I don't doubt that there are individuals on the planet who've become adjusted to a vegan diet and don't miss animal products generally. But if you're thinking about the whole, or if we're just thinking about anecdotes, you can definitely find people talking about how they absolutely do miss the taste of certain foods. It could be the individual animal product on its own, cheese for example, or it can be a dish like a hamburger in which meat or cheese may have been a part of the meal. So I wouldn't label this a misconception if it's actually true, because you can find vegans that will admit that they do miss meat. There are also countless videos of vegans replicating dishes that are meat dishes, and there are fake meats available in supermarkets. I don't think these are just for meat eaters who are transitioning to vegan diets. Long-term vegans use them too. I can definitely understand that even if you recognize that there's some evil behind the foods you used to eat in the past, one major thing that helps you not think of them as food anymore is understanding the actual impact that they had, just like Derek said. So when I think about the vegetables I used to eat on a daily basis, I think about all the harm that was caused on account of me getting those vegetables, and all the harm I was doing to myself on account of me eating those vegetables. They weren't even all that nutritious, especially not in comparison to meat. And why should we eat if not for the acquisition of nutrition?
This is why I think that people who go vegan and stay vegan do it not only for health reasons, but also for the ethical aspect of it as well. I first went vegan just about 15 years ago now, and I can honestly say that I do not miss those foods. And besides, most of the foods that go to season meat are herbs and spices and, you know, they're plants anyways.
I often hear this and I always find it bizarre. I've had pork ribs made just with salt that were some of the most amazing things I've ever eaten in my life. And for some, the same thing goes with a steak seasoned with salt. If a person decides that they want to switch it up and use some spices and try to experience a different flavor on their meat, there isn't anything inherently necessary about doing that. They're not necessarily masking an undesirable taste, for example, as we commonly do when we season our plants. They're not necessarily masking the fact that what we are consuming is actually legitimately toxic. It doesn't really require a great deal of processing in order to make it edible either. Barring environmental problems, the average person should be able to safely consume raw meat. In my experience, the more one eats meat, the more one comes to appreciate its natural taste. Kind of like when you wean yourself off of an addiction to sugar. When you eat something sweet again, you realize the sickly sweetness of it. When you go to eat a vegetable or another type of plant, you come to realize how bitter or otherwise undesirable it is when you haven't eaten it in a while. But meat and fat seem to be very palatable things overall, and that's what I look forward to the most. I wouldn't eat the spices on their own. Also, I don't really blame vegans for missing meat or other animal products. I think it's only natural. It's similar to how your body attaches itself to something it recognizes as evolutionarily beneficial, such as a sweet taste or the combination of oil, sugar, and salt. Except with one, it's actually life-sustaining, and with the others, it's just poisonous.
And if you do get cravings for those foods, there's so many different like mock meat options available on store shelves now that it's really easy to just squash those cravings. But, you know, for the most part, no, vegans do not miss meat.
I just don't think he's being realistic when he says that. I'm not expecting him to pull up any statistics because I don't think this is something that humans should waste their time gathering statistics on. But common sense, the anecdotal testimony of others, as well as personal experience, will tell the average person that they absolutely do.
Number 5, vegans eat lots of processed foods. So yes, some do, but so do most people.
You know, I'm not the best at recognizing fallacies, but I'm pretty sure there's like a tu quoque thing going on here. It's like a constant, I know I am, but what are you? If we're talking about veganism and there's a criticism about vegans, then the vegans should be able to support why they do the thing they do instead of just simply saying that they're not the only ones who do it.
Something like 73% of the US's food supply comes from highly processed foods. So this isn't something unique just to people who are on a plant-based diet. But I think that most people who are eating a plant-based diet understand that in order to feel the full health benefits from it, you have to be eating real food, whole or minimally processed foods, just like the ones that I show on my channel.
Like the protein powders and the supplements?
But yeah, vegans, maybe some eat a lot of processed food, but it doesn't mean that all do.
This is also something that's kind of annoying. I feel like one of the most basic things every human being should understand is, when a person makes a generalization, there's always exceptions to the rule. If we're talking about the majority of vegans, we're talking about what's to be expected from the average vegan. If the criticism holds, then that's why people can make that kind of comment about those kinds of people. So if it turns out that, yes, a lot of vegans eat junk food or heavily processed food, as you even recommended to people earlier in the video when you showed that garbage fake meat, I don't think this can be considered a misconception.
Number 6, vegans are nutrient deficient. So in all my years of doing this, I did nutrition coaching, and I've talked to thousands of vegans over the years, and really nutrient deficiencies are not all that common, especially for people that are eating a well-rounded diet, eating enough calories, and then properly supplementing as well.
I said this before, but I'll say it again. Sometimes you tell a vegan your diet is nutritionally inferior because you have to supplement. And this is 100% a valid observation to make. Vegans will say, well, omnivore dieters supplement too, almost as though they're saying, well, omnivores have nutritionally deficient diets too. I don't disagree with them, but it wouldn't matter even if I did. We're talking about veganism, we're talking about vegans, we're talking about vegan diets. And so can you please prove that your diet is not nutritionally bankrupt? When it comes to the supplements they take, it's serious business. It's not one or two willy-nilly things that most people can live without or things that most people don't have trouble with. It's stuff that risks their mental health, stuff that risks death, stuff that can lead to brain shrinkage, stuff that can lead to anemia and diminished hormonal function, unhealthy weight maintenance, loss of periods, things that are not so uncommon to hear vegans complain about incidentally. We were talking before about protein and whether or not vegans could build muscle. If you took an all-natural person and you had them try to build muscle on a vegan diet and then subsequently had that person transition to an all-meat diet and then had them try to build muscle, I wonder if we would see a difference. I would especially be interested to see the difference if, in both scenarios, this person was unable to consume protein powders. There are so many things I would want to know. How much easier it would be for the body to function, how much easier it would be for the body to do the basic things it needs to do when you're feeding it properly. It's important. It's what makes one diet nutritionally sound and the other one nutritionally bankrupt.
There are some nutrients that vegans are more likely to be deficient from, and that is vitamin B12, D, omega-3s, zinc, iodine, and then for women, iron.
I'm so glad Derek said that because I didn't want to have to waste time explaining these basic things to people who in the comments like to say things like, why do you think vegans need supplements? Or why do you think vegans need to supplement? Like I'm just making shit up.
But vegans do have higher intakes of certain nutrients that this systematic review goes over here. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, alpha-linoleic acid, fiber, folate, vitamin E, and magnesium, which were actually found to be at risk of inadequacy among meat eaters. Additionally, the intake of vitamin B1, B6, and C was considerably higher, especially in vegans. So are all vegans nutrient deficient? No, definitely not, but some care should be taken to make sure that you aren't.
One of the things I didn't really think about in the beginning, but I always try to keep in the forefront of my mind now, is what do we actually see as exhibited in people in terms of these deficiencies? When it comes to things like fiber, you can only be deficient in fiber if humans have determined that people have a requirement of fiber. If we have determined that, we have to ask ourselves why. People who eat like me, we have no need for fiber. The main reason is because I'm not regularly poisoning myself with plants I'm not supposed to be eating. I don't need to bulk up my stool. I don't need to pass my stool any differently from how I'm passing it now. I'm getting the nutrition I need in the appropriate amount that I need it in. The same thing goes for vitamin C. It's not that I don't need it, but I'm apparently getting what I need in the amount of meat that I eat now. Likely because, again, I'm not poisoning myself with copious amounts of carbohydrates or with plants in general. If I were to go to a doctor, and the doctor was concerned that I wasn't getting enough of something that people may be lacking in, what exactly are the symptoms that are on display that would be cause for concern? Should the doctor just insist, oh, you need fiber, so please start consuming some? Oh, what's that? Now you're suffering from IBS symptoms? You poor thing. Here are some medicines that can help you cope with that. Also, is it just me, or is saying that I'm not getting enough ALA like saying that I'm not getting enough beta-carotene? It's just weird. The reason to be concerned if a vegan is getting enough B12 would be in the display of lack of B12. Not so much just simply that science has determined that there's a risk.
Number 7, vegans take tons of supplements. So this just isn't true, but there are 3 that I think should definitely be considered by all vegans, and maybe by everybody, and that is vitamin B12, vitamin D3, and maybe an omega-3 supplement. The supplement industry is a massive, like trillion-dollar industry, and you cannot tell me that the small percentage of vegans are the ones that are propping that industry up. No.
I understand his point, but I mentioned before that there is a difference between the masses being driven towards consumerism, that is, in many cases not necessary, and the masses requiring them because they are purposely starving themselves of key nutrients due to the way that they choose to eat. For me, more so than the quantity, I'm concerned about the reason why this thing needs to be taken and the risk of not having access to it. But for some vegans trying to feel better, trying to make sure they maintain their vegan label for as long as possible, there have been videos of people buying a multitude of supplements to try to feel better. And so I think a person would be hard-pressed to say it's a misconception when we've seen it happen. If there are vegans who will promote a supplement line and show themselves taking a large variety of supplements, even if it's just for money, they are influencers trying to convince other people to be vegan, and this is what they're showing them they do as a vegan. Whether or not they're just doing it for the camera, how are we supposed to know that? If we just take them at their word, that's one thing, but if we take it from what they're showing us and we can see they do take them, that is not a lie, and I wouldn't call that a misconception either.
People love taking supplements, and you see like a bodybuilder or someone online or whatever that isn't vegan take a handful of vitamins, smash some protein powder, and nobody bats an eye. And then
they absolutely should, though. I hate looking at stuff like that, and I hate the normalization of this. Still, we recognize why they're doing it. These people are chronic abusers of their bodies, and in order to maintain that self-destruction, they take those substances.
And as soon as a vegan takes B12, it's like, oh, you're nutrient deficient, you take tons of supplements, and yeah, that's just not the case.
There's a big difference between them taking that stuff and a vegan taking B12, and I really hope that I should not have to point out why. B12 is absolutely not the thing to point to make it seem like it's such a flick of the wrist thing.
Number 8, the vegan diet is boring. So honestly, I think it's people that just can't cook that say this. Because if you guys watch my channel, you know that this diet is not boring. There's so many different foods that you can cook, so many different flavors to experiment with, and it honestly wasn't until I went vegan that I started really opening my eyes to all the different foods and spices and everything that are out there. And I became such a better cook, started using such a wider variety of ingredients.
Ever since I became the perfect little consumer, finding more and more things that I can try to add to make my nutritionally deficient diet work for me, the excess animal death I'm responsible for, just to try to make my food taste good or look good.
And every single meal that I cook is like the best thing I've ever had. Like, I look forward to every single meal. So no, the vegan diet is definitely not boring. But number 9, the vegan diet is expensive. Boy, I sure have to save money on my grocery bill. I need to buy more meat. Said no one ever. Like, the vegan diet is the cheapest diet that you could be eating. All the foods that I base my cooking around, and many other vegans do, is like the cheapest foods that are out there. Beans, rice, lentils, potatoes. These are all extremely cheap foods, especially if you buy them in bulk and you buy them dry and you cook them yourself. I would definitely say that meat is more expensive. Have you seen the price of it in grocery stores lately? It is expensive, especially the grass-fed, pasture-raised, humanely killed stuff that everyone claims that they're eating, and cheese, eggs, all that stuff is expensive too. And these industries are highly subsidized, so this stuff should be even more expensive than it really is.
This honestly depends on where you live. In my experience, when I used to live in the States, what he's saying is true. There will be some plants that are more expensive than others, but if we're fulfilling our minimum calorie requirement, whatever the hell that's supposed to be, and then supplementing to make sure we get our nutrients, I would assume that the expensive part of a vegan diet would be in the supplements. Perhaps for some people, when they do try to adopt a vegan diet and they try to eat organic or whatever the little rules would then become to try to make sure that you are actually reducing animal harm, then I can expect that that would cause their food to get more expensive. The same thing goes for meat. Now, the reason why meat and other nutritious foods are as expensive as they are is because they are nutritious. The system is set up so that people who buy real food in the supermarket pay a premium for it. And the most useless garbage junk is the cheapest stuff you can get.
So of course you can make a vegan diet expensive if you're buying all of the like premium prepackaged stuff and like green juices and vegan cookies and all this sort of stuff, but it definitely doesn't have to be expensive.
But I feel like this is saying that basically it's okay to cause more harm or it's okay to choose a less vegan option because you can't afford it. So it sounds like in any case you can make exceptions even if it means at the end of the day you have a shitty diet. You save money and then you get to say that the vegan diet isn't expensive, but what's really vegan about it except for the fact that it doesn't contain animal products? There's still harm being done and I thought we were trying to mitigate that harm. What good is it to eat food that doesn't contain animal products if you're killing more animals on account of it at the end of the day?
Number 10, being vegan is a privilege. So in general, getting to choose what you buy from the store and what you eat is a privilege when looking at things on a global scale. We are very lucky here. And there are many places around the world that do not have the same choices that we do, and that's generally because of limited resources. There are even food deserts in the USA where the only options for miles are fast food restaurants and gas station snacks. So yes, compared to those places, being vegan is a privilege, but it's not usually the people from those places making these accusations. The people saying this are often people who have the same access to food as I do.
And even in point 10, we still have something that's not a misconception. It doesn't matter that other people also enjoy privileges. If we say that vegans enjoy a privilege and they enjoy a privilege, they are privileged. It's also not just simply that they have access to such a wide variety of food, it is the access to the supplements as well. People in places where they can't readily get their hands on real food don't always have the privilege of access to or being able to afford those supplements. And so the lack of nutrition that they are subjected to is much worse for them, and they may not have options. Yes, it's an exorbitant flex of privilege to choose to purposely starve yourself and to choose to purposely force yourself to require supplementation, understanding that you're living a life in which, were anything to happen to you, you could likely afford medical intervention, and that medical intervention would be high quality and more readily available than for others in less fortunate situations.
So just because something might seem privileged compared to what others have doesn't mean that we shouldn't still try and make the best decision possible, the one that's best for us, the environment, the animals, and all that. So
yeah, like making sure that every meal that's on your plate is as nutritionally adequate as it could possibly be with as little matter as humanly possible. Making sure that there aren't a great deal and variety of plants on your plate at any given time so that you can reduce the amount of things that you consume overall and then therefore reduce the amount of animal suffering and pain and death that you are responsible for otherwise. Making it so that you are eating your allotted amount of nutrient-dense food, you're not required to supplement and feed into yet another system of environmental destruction and therefore animal harm.
that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you think that I got any wrong, let me know in the comments down below. If you have any to add to this list, definitely let me know in the comments down below as well. If you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe so that you can see more from me, and I will see you soon with another video. Thank you for watching.
There were an awful lot of reasonable conceptions in this list of supposed misconceptions, Derek. That's all I have left to say.